Okay, so that's the Rugby Championship in the bag. Back-to-back Rugby Championships for the Springboks. They've won probably not their best win. I suppose it's a bit difficult to expect 3 wins in a row like we've had in Durban and Wellington to be followed up in London. Everyone thought Argentina were going to be difficult. As Nick Mallett and Gavin Rich standing next to me here, we all predicted on the week in the preview that we thought Argentina were going to play it a lot tighter. They were a lot better. So first of all, you've got to give them credit before we start. Well done, Argentina. Well done, Springboks, for winning back-to-back Rugby Championships. But probably not their best performance, not their worst performance of the Rugby Championship, Gavin, but not their best performance either.
No, I think we must just be a little bit sober about it, though. It was still a comprehensive win. You look at the end score and you say it was 2 points. They just squeaked it. It wasn't really like that.
No.
I mean, and I think the key for the Boks, I think the lesson that they would have learned from this game is the need for better game management when they're leading. In a way, this Rugby Championship ended where it started. In the first game, you'll remember in the last quarter, South Africa were playing like they were chasing a game when they were leading, and they gave away, I think it was to the big Australian centre. Remember that there was a pass. It was Mani who gave it away. Yeah, to Soili. Yeah. And on that occasion, it led to Australia winning because it was a game at altitude, and South Africa had played themselves out off their own feet. In this game, there was no need for South Africa to be attacking from deep in their own territory. Then the thing is, though, that one of the keys to the Boks now and why they've become so good is that they're playing a sort of a high risk, or sort of high risk, high reward approach. And when that happens, you are sometimes going to take hits and give away points, and that's what happened today. So in the end, if it hadn't been for Carreras hitting the post, the Argentina fullback hitting the post with a penalty about 3 minutes from time, you could have had the Springboks really sort of quite nervy in those last 2 minutes of the game. But even then, I think they would have held on. I mean, they to me they had the game comfortably in hand once they took the lead, and they took the lead very early in the second half to that first Malcolm Marx try.
Well, I mean, to me, look, they had a horrible start, and let's start there. A lot of things went wrong. You've got to give Argentina a lot of credit for what they did in that first half. Kane Moody's yellow card, which is one of those unfortunate ones. He was upright, but the player jinked inside. I thought there was enough mitigation there, but it is, according to the laws, a yellow card. So that put them on the back foot, and one guy down, Argentina scored. They fought their way back very well, and Kane Moody, let's just put it out there, was extremely lucky to not get a red with that intercept that he sort of the knockdown. It wasn't ruled deliberate by the referee, Andrea Piardi, but it was very lucky. We've seen a lot of those at URC and in fact all levels being called as deliberate when there's one hand touching the ball. So he was very lucky there.
Well, just to explain, because he was on a yellow already, that's why it would have been a red. It wasn't a sort of a red card offence on its own, but two yellows equals a red. Yeah. So he was lucky. But having said that, Kane Moody is again a player that's come through in leaps and bounds in this championship, and we've got backline players. We can get to the forwards later, but we've got backline players who have really standing up. Ethan Hooker, I didn't know that he was as good as he actually is. I mean, he's outstanding on the wing, and I mean, what's we going to do when we've got some of the other guys like Kirtley Orense coming back? And, that's an interesting question. We've got a lot of wings coming through. Edwin van Merwe's fit again, and he's playing again for the Sharks. So he could be back in the squad for the end of year tour. But Ethan Hooker, Kane Moody, obviously Sasha Feinberg and Gomez Zulu. He wasn't the star in this game that he was in the previous game, Sasha. But, there were times in that first half when his running was still dazzling. But he was also symptomatic of the Springbok problem. Yeah. It was almost like we were sort of too rushed. The Springboks felt that, we won so handsomely last week, and almost like their minds were going back to Kings Park. And so he was trying those long passes, and maybe should have just that the Springboks should have played another phase further, and they probably could have still scored enough points in that first half to be in the lead at halftime. Although Argentina dominated possession maybe in the first 25 minutes to half an hour, South Africa's dominance in the scrums was so telling, and they had all those scrum penalties. They really should have converted that, and I thought that had the Springboks been in the lead at halftime, it would have been warranted, given that they were starting to become dominant. They had momentum at the momentum at half time, and it wasn't too surprising that they took control in the third quarter. And really, in that third quarter was when they won the game, and then they became sloppy at the end. And so eventually it took some gloss off. I'm a bit sorry in a way that they didn't get the bonus point try, because it would be nice for them to finish with one more point than New Zealand at least, rather than it being decided on points differential. I was listening to the guys on TV just now and talking about not much of a gap between. I think there's a huge gap between South Africa and New Zealand, and I think that there's a bit of a false gloss on the Rugby Championship table. The Springboks won 2 games handsomely. They really did win today comprehensively as well. I mean, forget about the 2-point scoreboard, the scoreline. It was a comprehensive victory for South Africa, and it's I do think that some of the other nations have a bit of a problem. I mean, Australia lost again today. The real anomaly, and you and I were talking about it when we were having lunch earlier today at the Skukuza Golf Club. The real anomaly was that game against Australia, that final quarter against Australia where South Africa fell apart. And if it hadn't been for that, I think that they would have won this championship quite comfortably, and there'd be no questions about how good they are.
It's interesting, because in our discussion, what we were saying, and I said to Gavin earlier today, was those 2 games in Australia were probably the worst 2 games the Springboks played. Even the one they won in Cape Town, they weren't that impressive.
No.
But you sort of want to go back to the discussions we were having at that time about how much the fitness, because they certainly, to me, they're the fittest team in the Rugby Championship, and they proved it. But at that time, if it was close to the fitness sort of, it's in the past, they lost the one game, they won the one game. I think today, I also now remarked to you, sort of while we were sitting watching the game, that when the Boks got, I think there's 26 points unanswered that they scored after going 13-3 down, it was literally just that Cheslin Colby loose pass. And I said to you earlier in the game, I thought he was a bit out of sorts today. And that's saying, and that's not a knock against Cheslin. It's his high standards. He's one of the best wingers in the world. And today he was a 6 out of 10 and not an 8 out of 10 maybe. And that sort of let Argentina back in. You got to give them credit. They took their chances, and that's all you can do when you're the opposition. But I thought the Boks were well in control. If that counter attack hadn't cost them a try, if they had gone on and scored, or if they'd scored next, I think it probably would have been a big scoreline as well.
Well, the one thing that the Argentina are very good at, which the other teams that in the Rugby Championship that have played against the Boks aren't good at, is actually the aerial contest. Their back 3 was magnificent today. In fact, Carrera should maybe carry on at fullback, because the new their fly half today was outstanding. I'm not going to try and pronounce his name, but he was really, really good for them. But their back 3, every time we used to, as South African people who watch the Springboks play, we used to sort of seeing the ball go up and then half expecting it to come back to South Africa. And today it wasn't doing that. It was the Argentinians were catching it and playing it back. And sometimes when they kicked the ball into South Africa, they were winning the aerial battle. So that you've got to take that into account too. The Springboks won today because of their forward power in the scrums, and they did actually have that momentum in that third quarter. I mean, they were completely dominant in that third quarter. And look, I mean, I said earlier that they've got to learn that when you're leading, you don't need to chase the game. But I do understand what they were trying to do there. Like one more try, and Argentina would really be out of it. But it didn't work out that way. High reward, high risk. On that occasion, it broke down. And Cheslin, unfortunately, for the second week in a row, was the guy who gave away 7 points. But, that's just, I suppose you could say that comes with the territory and we're going to go back to last year now, to after when we were standing talking after the All Black game in Cape Town, and I mentioned the expression growing pains. As good as the Boks are, there are still growing pains. And I think that was evident today. And yet, to me, the South Africans are just so far ahead of the rest. Yeah,
I still think, they're by far the number 1 team in the world. I think that's without question. I don't know how, I know people are going to say to me, tell me how the rankings work, if I say I don't know how the world rankings work. But they head and shoulders above the opposition at the moment. And look, and that's only a week's a long time in rugby, so that can all change by the end of the year too when we get past there. But they certainly, there's enough depth, there's enough players that have come through, and there's certainly, they know how to win games. They don't get flustered when they get 13-3 down in a test, and
we do when we're watching them. We get flustered.
But I think most Springbok fans do as well. But it's just, to me,
one more try would have been a problem. Yeah,
and that's the thing. And I also wonder how much the mindset, because I know coaches will never, and I'll ask Nick this tomorrow when we chat. But when you've got that mindset that you just have to win, and you're chasing that extra try or something, how much that sort of, if it plays any role, I'm not sure. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I don't know, subconsciously it does. But it's an interesting one.
I just think that when you're coming into a game having won the previous one by 37 points and having scored 67 points, and everybody's talking about how they're going to win by 20 points again, it must put huge pressure on you. Yeah. And then you suddenly fall behind early on, and you must be thinking, goodness, we could actually lose this game. I'm not sure that they ever thought that. Just going back to that world ranking thing, one of the sort of anomalies of the world ranking is that I think that France are the biggest, and I've said this before, I think that France are now the biggest challenges to the Boks, but the world rankings don't reflect that, because France, and I think it was the right decision, sent an understrength team to New Zealand and they lost 3-0. So obviously that affects their rankings. If it depends who. So that is maybe the problem with the world rankings. It depends who's taking them seriously at a given time. There was a time South Africa didn't care that much about the world rankings, but they are now, because they want to get a good seeding for the World Cup. But France, they obviously didn't care. I mean, Fabien Galtier sent a second string team to New Zealand, so that's going to be a huge game when we play them. The thing is, though, that we're playing in. Well, I don't know when our season is out of season, actually, to be honest, because we have a 12-month season. But France will just be starting playing again. I don't know if that's an advantage because it makes them fresher, or whether it's an advantage to South Africa because they've got momentum, having played so much international rugby in the last couple of months.
Well, I think that's definitely going to be the big test of the November tour. And I think what we'll do is we're here for a couple of days together in the Kruger National Park here. You can see the fires going in the background. We're going to have a Brian Anna. But I think we'll probably do a recap of the entire Rugby Championship and just maybe have a look at the Springbok squad and who's come through and who hasn't come through. And not that there's not somebody that off top of my head that hasn't come through, but that sort of thing, just who's made the most progress, and we'll do that a bit later in the week. I think for now, though, there's not much more we can say. I think it was a good win, mission accomplished. Maybe not as big as Durban, but it's still a very, very good victory. And they are, even though the log, as you said, Gav, doesn't really reflect it, they were by far, I think, to me, the most dominant, especially in the last 3 weeks of the competition when it mattered, the most dominant team in the competition.
Well, let's face it. I mean, they got outplayed in the last hour of their very first game, and that was a huge wake-up call. And then they were nervous the next week and didn't get a bonus point. And South Africans probably expected them to bounce back more comprehensively. So, given where they started, and remember too, they were one win in 3 games after they lost to New Zealand at Eden Park. They've picked up a very impressive momentum in the last couple of weeks. I mean, the obvious concern is that they're a little bit like Jake White used to use the term about oscillant, like an old diesel tractor. You need to be wound up and get some momentum going. Is that I think if you look back at the first halves of the last 4 games, they've probably
4 games. Not
Joburg. The last 4 games, going back to Eden Park. The last 4 games they've executed poorly, and they've started sluggishly. They weren't so sluggish in Wellington, but still the execution wasn't top notch on that particular day. So maybe that's something that needs to be looked at, because once again we have to say that the Springboks still haven't produced an 80-minute performance. And yet they've won the Rugby Championship, and that has to be a positive.
Yeah, there's not many negatives today. I mean, I started this by saying not their best performance, but certainly when it mattered, that third quarter, as you said, those 20 minutes and maybe the last 10 minutes when their scrum started really getting the penalties in that first half, that was certainly enough to win the game. Yeah. And I think we all wonder what's going to happen when they do hit their straps. And hopefully it's a 2027 World Cup final. That's where you'd want it to be. But I think as long as they can keep on producing and keep on, sort of turning up and making sure they win these games, I don't think many Springbok fans will be disappointed. I think we can sign it off for now. We'll be back tomorrow with Nick, with Nick Mallet, and we'll have that up by about lunchtime on Sunday. Hopefully, and we can chat a bit further about that. But for now, we're going to have a beer and enjoy the braai and enjoy another Rugby Championship win, and so should you.
Cheers.
Cheers.